Dietzman, and I'll be leading this session today. I want to tell you just a little bit about myself before we get started. Oops. I used to be a high school English teacher, and then I started writing curriculum, and that's when I began teaching student success at the college level. If you've never heard of student success, it's a course that a lot of colleges require freshmen to take, and some of them call it Intro to College or College Success or something like student success. And the point of these classes is to help students adjust to the different demands of college. And they usually kind of think about things like time management, writing and researching skills, stress management, financial skills, things like that. And I taught that class for a while, and now I teach education psychology classes at Arizona State University. I teach classes about motivation, the brain, learning and memory, and a few others. And I also work full-time for tutor.com as the learning design manager. So that's why I'm here to talk to you guys today. I love talking about student success. And today I'm going to share some helpful tips for study sessions with you. And we're going to talk very specifically about note-taking and test-taking. I'm also going to talk to you about some wellness techniques connected to your study strategies. And many of these ideas come from my own experiences, and many are research-based. And these tips, some of them might seem kind of obvious to you, and some of them might not, but you might not have heard all of them all in one place. Either way, they are good reminders, and I hope that today you just ask yourself if you are doing these things or if you could be doing these things. Today, I will not be talking specifically about like the SAT or the ACT or anything to do with college admissions because that's not really my area of expertise. These strategies are going to help you study for your classes and take your class tests, prepare for big projects, and things like that. So please feel free to ask questions along the way, and I will do my best to answer them, and I can also answer more questions at the end. So let's start with all the things you need to do before you start studying. Before you settle in for a session, designate a good study area. Make sure that your space has all the supplies you'll need, has good light, and set yourself up with a drink and maybe a snack so you don't have to stop your flow. Now, I know a lot of you are probably doing online school, so you've designated your area, but I'm going to tell you a story. My son is a junior in high school, and he told me the other day that this kid logged in for class on Zoom from his bed. He was sitting in his bed, and maybe he thought it was funny, who knows. But the teacher suggested he needed to move to a different place, and he was like, "Why? I'm comfortable." Well, here's why. If you start class or you start studying in your bed, you're more than likely going to feel a little lazy, probably a little sleepy. And if you want to be successful, bed is probably not your most productive space. Also, make sure you get rid of distractions. Turn off your alerts and your email, put your phone on silent. I know this is hard to do, and try just leaving it in a different room. You won't be tempted to look at it if it isn't close. And then sit in a place where you won't be distracted by your family, your friends, people yelling, loud music, stuff like that. Also, make a plan and set a goal. Have an end goal for the time that you've designated and know exactly what you want to accomplish. You'll waste time if you have to sit down and then sort through all of your assignments and your classwork, figure out what you need to do. So scheduling out your week ahead of time is a good idea and a good way to use your study time for studying and not getting organized. And then reward yourself when you finish a good study session. For me, knowing the reward ahead of time was my motivation. I like to think about what I'm going to do when I'm all done with my study session. So everything I tell you today requires discipline. Learning remotely, finishing an AP class, studying for the SAT, it all takes discipline and commitment. You have to commit to yourself that you're going to do it and that you're going to be a success. So my college students always have great intentions. At the beginning of every class, they have to answer this question. What is your strategy for completing your work on time in this class? And they are notorious for saying things like, well, I'm really going to try to study Monday through Friday and not procrastinate. But, I'm working part-time now and I'm on the tennis team and I have an internship and I know I'm going to struggle with this. And when I read that, I think, Well, you didn't even start and you already came up with an excuse. You already said, I'm probably not going to be successful. Make your intentions real habits. It takes 66 days on average to form a new habit. So give yourself time to form that good study habit because your bad habits, they are already there. You've already established them and they are easier at first, but I promise you that new and better habits will be easier on you in the long run. Next, be honest with yourself. So if you curl up in that chair, are you likely to fall asleep? What time of day is best for your brain? Do you really perform best when you're under pressure? Can you spend an entire day studying? How long does it really take you to write a paper? These are questions based on things that I have heard my own kids say. I told you that I have a son in high school. I also have a son in college. And he always tells me that he performs best under pressure. And just know how your brain works and how you learn best. And if you're not sure, then try different strategies and figure it out. For example, I know that I don't study well at night. And I know that I don't study well when I'm hungry. I know that I don't study well for more than 3 hours at a time. I think best when I'm organized. I'm honest with myself. So I'm not going to try to waste some time studying right before dinner or late at night. And I'm not going to study when I need to clean my room because that's distracting and I'm not organized. And I'm not going to try to write a paper 3 hours before it's due. So, why you shouldn't procrastinate. I hope that you all know what is wrong with this presentation. I get these kinds of submissions every term. And it's always the student who turns in their assignment at 11:59 p.m. on the day it's due. What's wrong with this? Well, I can tell immediately that this student didn't give himself time to actually put together a visually appealing assignment. He threw his thoughts together on a blank PowerPoint and he turned it in. And these are often the submissions that are riddled with spelling and grammar mistakes as well. So it's true, proven fact that procrastinators get lower grades. Those who work ahead will take the time to put together something better than a white presentation with black words. And they will probably remember to run a spell check. And in case you wonder what is wrong with this, so you should never turn in a PowerPoint presentation without images and colors. Just a little side note. So here's one I know you're all probably wondering, should you cram? Is cramming good? Is cramming bad? Well, many researchers and many teachers will say that cramming is bad. But planned cramming is a little bit different. I found times when cramming was just what I needed, and so I'm going to tell you the truth. Okay. Cramming works for short-term memory. You probably know that. It works really well for vocabulary tests and for one and dones. So, like, what do I mean by a one and done? If you're taking a test and you know for a fact that you'll never need to know that information for another class or the next test, then it's okay to cram and forget. An example was this history class I took in college. I was not a history major, and I was taking other much more important classes and difficult classes for my major at the time. This class was at 7:30 in the morning, and on test days I used to get up super early, just cram my notes, and I actually performed very well in that class. And then when it was over, it was over. I mean, I guarantee you I forgot everything I learned in that class. But when you shouldn't cram is when you have another test coming up and it builds on the knowledge from this test. So you're not doing yourself any favors if you cram before every test and you still have a final exam that's coming up that's cumulative. If you need to understand a concept because you're going to have to learn something more that builds on it, then cramming isn't helpful. And cramming is also super bad news for essay questions because essay questions always require a little bit deeper understanding. If you haven't studied thoroughly and deeply, you're going to bomb those essay questions. And if you only cram, just so you know, you're selling your brain short because our brains need time to process. And you can't give your brain time to process new information if you try to cram everything in all at once at the last minute. So that's my little bit about cramming. Let's talk about how you do study the right way when you actually need to learn something and not just memorize something. First of all, don't multitask. Using your phone, texting, checking social media, replying to emails, or even trying to study while you're at work, if you've ever done that, is probably not very effective. There is a lot of research to prove that those who multitask don't give anything their full attention and therefore give each task just a percentage of what they could give if they focused. Multitasking causes trouble with organizing your thoughts, and that would be okay if you were working on something that you knew backwards and forwards. But when it comes to learning something brand new, this just doesn't work. It diminishes your ability to filter irrelevant information. If you're like me, you want to quickly identify what's irrelevant because it cuts down on the time that you're going to spend studying. And multitasking also steals your refocusing time. And so, what do I mean by refocusing time? Well, it takes an average of 14 minutes to refocus completely on a task after you've answered an email or responded to a text or checked Instagram or whatever. 14 minutes. So, when you're really talking about time management and you want to get the studying done, then it kind of makes sense. Just put everything away, focus, and get it done. So, do it right the first time. Lots of students fall into the trap of believing that if they reread chapters or rewatch lectures, it will help them get the information better. And it doesn't really work that way. It's better to take the information in, commit it to your mind and understanding by processing it, reflecting on it, and then go back later and review it in a new way. For example, if you watch a lecture or a video, let's say you have to watch something like that for a class, have your notes ready. Watch a small section, then stop, pause it, and jot down what you got from it. If something's confusing, Google it really quickly. See if you can find it in a way that makes more sense. And then go back to your video or your lecture and watch it again for a few more minutes. Then just keep repeating that same process. Same with reading an article or some long thing you have to read for class, not textbook necessarily, but something else. Read it once and stop throughout to talk yourself through what you just read. Take notes as you go. In addition, don't waste time reviewing what you already know. If you make flashcards and you go through them and you know all of them, then don't keep doing it. You know it. Take that time to review the stuff that you don't know. So, our tendency is to review the easy stuff because it gives us confidence, but it really doesn't do anything to help us when we go take that really hard test. Similar to what I just explained about doing it right the first time, if you attend a class in person, or like a live class, through Zoom or whatever, never sit there and just listen because very few of us actually retain information just from hearing it, especially if it's like a dry and complicated topic. Passive learning is when you just let something come to you. You just sit there, you listen, whatever sticks, sticks. But being an active learner means that you're taking the information in and you're processing it and you're putting it into your own words or you're drawing a picture at the same time because you're actually taking it in and making meaning of it. Now you're being an active learner, and that's a much more productive way to learn something. So now we're going to talk about reading a textbook, which is probably one of the more boring things you have to do as a student. I mean, I'll be honest. But there is a way to do it. If you're assigned a chapter to read, or maybe you've got 2 or 3 chapters to read, don't just open your book and start reading front to back. You have to do these things first. Preview the chapter. That means you flip through it. How long is it? Set your mind to what you're going to accomplish. Like look at the headings, the sections, the pictures, tables, graphs, and help your brain kind of form like this. Oh, okay, this is what's coming. Then read the introduction to the chapter. We often skip this part, but it helps to put context to what's coming. And then flip to the end of the chapter and read the summary. Actually, you should do that before you read the chapter. It might not all make sense yet because you haven't read the chapter, but it's going to help you make connections when you do go back and read. Then you go back to the beginning of the first section and you begin reading. Read in chunks. Read a section, then go to your notes and summarize what you just read. And remember not to read the whole thing all at once. Sitting down and reading 3 chapters of a textbook, what are you going to end up doing? Well, your eyes are going to glaze over, your mind's going to start to wander, and suddenly you'll realize that you just read 3 pages and you have no idea what you just read. So remember to be an active learner, which also means to be an active reader. Constantly stop and talk yourself through your reading. I hope this is helpful. I know it seems like it's going to take a long time to read a chapter, and it might, but remember, if you're doing it right the first time, you're saving yourself from having to flip back to your book later and read it again because you didn't get it the first time. So let's talk about how to take notes, because I told you to take notes when you're reading or when you're watching a video or a lecture. First of all, don't over highlight in your book. This is a really big mistake that students make. If you can't narrow down what's important to a phrase or two or a sentence or two on a page, then it's not worth highlighting. Plus, if you highlight, then you're tied to your textbook every time you want to study. So it's really better to have a notebook or notes on your computer, however you prefer to take notes. It's much easier to open and review at a later date. Also remember that if you're highlighting, you're not forcing yourself to put it into your own words. And if you don't put it into your own words, you're less likely to remember it. So when you take notes, turn the headings of your chapter into questions and then answer the questions with your notes below. This is a really good way to make sure you're getting it. Also, always put your notes into your own words. And like I said before, own words is really important. So, like, I'm a big bullet list kind of note taker. I like outline notes where I jot down big ideas and concepts in an outline format. Rarely do I write in complete sentences, and I never copy down a teacher's notes word for word. And I remember students used to do that in my class all the time. Like, oh, can you slow down so I can copy down your notes? If you do that, then you're so busy trying to copy that you're not processing. And if you're not processing, remember, you're not learning, and therefore you're not really doing yourself any favors when you go to study later. So I'm not a fan of any notes that don't come easily and naturally, but that's just me. What works for you? Or what does your teacher require? I know some teachers have certain note taking strategies that they want you to do. And for those classes, you do it. For other classes, maybe you choose not to. And when you read a textbook, you, of course, should always pay special attention to vocabulary words. So, research shows that we learn more from writing than we do from typing. If you prefer to type, then start there. See if it works for you. After you take a test, look back at your notes and see if you had all of the pertinent information that you needed for that test. If you didn't, then you know that you had difficulty identifying the important information. If you had really good typed notes and you just didn't remember them, then handwriting your notes next time is probably a good idea. Same with any kind of notes. Look back at them after you take a test to see if you did a good job. If the test was on totally different information and you were like, whoa, that was not at all what I studied, that none of that was in my notes, then you need to try a new strategy altogether. But if your notes are really good and you look back at them and you're like, gosh, I had everything here. Why didn't I remember it? Then you may just need to try a different way of organizing your notes. And that's when these like Cornell type notes kind of maybe come in, or maybe your teacher has you do different types of notebooks and you can find that that works better for you. Depending on the subject, this step can be critical. If you draw pictures or maps, you're going to be more likely to understand the connections between things. Plus, if you're a visual learner, like I am, you'll be more likely to remember your pictures when you go take your test. So, the very best way to learn and remember something is repeated exposure. So, try this: read, take your notes, review your notes later, make flashcards. Go look it up, find a video you can watch. Now you've seen or processed that information like 4 or 5 times. you have a greater chance of remembering that information later. Now, should you do this with every single chapter, every unit, in every class? No. This is for difficult information that may be harder for you to remember. And keep in mind that if you take 50 pages of notes and you never look at them until a couple days before a big test, you're going to be overwhelmed. So, repeated exposure in different modalities like this is an important step throughout your process. And that's why scheduling is really important and scheduling that study time. So if you're taking a really hard class and maybe you don't even have a test for another couple weeks, it's not a bad idea to schedule a small amount of time, 30 minutes maybe in a week, where you're just reviewing your notes. You're making yourself flashcards, just keeping your brain active and remembering all those things that you've learned along the way. Then when the test comes, you don't have to try to remember all of it and study all of it all at once or all in one week. Tough to do. Also, talking through a concept is the best way to commit it to your memory, even if you don't fully understand something at first. So, I always think of that phrase, fake it till you make it. And that's what I think of when I think of this, because talking through it, even if it seems confusing and you don't quite get it, will actually help you process and learn it. So, just an idea. Maybe at dinner, when your parents ask you what you did at school, you could try talking them through a concept and see if it makes sense to you or them. So, one of the biggest mistakes students make is thinking that just reading something is enough. Reviewing your notes is an important piece, but how do you know if you really know it? Well, you have to assess yourself, test yourself. Make those flashcards, like I said, those work. Use apps, find online quizzes. I know you guys probably know way more about these kinds of things than I do. Test yourself, though, to see if you really know it. And this is where study groups come in handy too. So you can be a great note taker and you can do a really good job reviewing your notes. But if you don't actually test yourself, sometimes reading notes doesn't tell you that you really know it. So you have to still do that extra step. So I always talk about wellness when I talk about anything related to student success because this is a critical component to studying and being healthy. Exercise actually increases brain performance. So take breaks in your study time and go for a walk or consider going to, the gym or riding your bike or something right before you have a long study session. For me, exercise was a reward for my studying because I liked it. But whatever works for you, and it doesn't mean that you have to be in like the best shape ever. Just know that when your body feels kind of like it needs to move, it needs to move. So get up and go do something. And when your brain is tired, you might also need to take a quick power nap. This is tough. This is really tough for teenagers. If you're worried you're going to fall asleep for hours, which both of my sons do all the time, every time they say they're going to take a nap, it's like 3 hours later that they get up. And you don't have 3 hours to take a long nap, then hone in on the power napping skill. I actually learned this really well when I was in college, so maybe you'll get it then, but it's crucial for life in general. Research shows that power naps are actually more effective than long naps in helping you to feel revived and rested. When you take that 3 hour nap and you're really groggy afterwards and kind of grumpy, well, power naps, you don't feel like that. So you set an alarm for 20 or 30 minutes and you just rest. Also, make sure that you're eating while you're studying, and your eating should be healthy. If you're really working on something that's really difficult, eat healthy. You've heard all the statistics and dangers about, energy drinks and soda. So be mindful of that. And lastly, one of the best things for your brain is music. You're not going to like this probably, but I don't mean like music with lyrics. Classical music and piano music is actually known to stimulate your brain, and it can play in the background. So your brain is not distracted, but completely focused on the task at hand. And there are all kinds of study playlists you can find on any place you listen to music. If you type in study music, you're going to find this classical playlist that you can play. And it's not like you have to do that every single time, but if you're really doing something that you like need to focus, maybe you're writing a really intense paper and you want to get a really good grade on it, that's when you really need to play that classical music. Also, if you're reading something that's difficult, you don't want to read and have lyrics playing in the background because you're going to tend to listen to those lyrics and get distracted. So I'm almost done. I hope you guys ask questions. Before you take a test, start with a positive mindset and believe that you will succeed and envision yourself passing that test. But if you've taken tests somewhat unsuccessfully, maybe in the past, maybe you have some test anxiety, you're just not great at taking tests, make sure you advocate for yourself. And that means that you talk to your teacher and ask what you need to know for the test and what you could do better in terms of studying. Share your strategies with your teacher. Tell your teacher what you've actually been doing and then ask what you could do better. It's quite possible also that your teacher is going to give you a really good tip, like all the information on the tests comes from those articles I give you, or all the essay questions or discussion questions from class, or I post study guides on the resources page of the online classroom. And like maybe you go, wow, I didn't even know there was a resources page in the online classroom. So advocate for yourself means asking questions and asking what you can do better and letting your teacher help you. Most teachers will help you. They'll want you to do well, especially when they know you care enough to ask. So all the tips I shared with you require time. You probably caught on to that. Studying effectively takes time. If you're a procrastinator, you will not have the time to do all the things we just talked about. Will you really have time to review, reflect, and you put off studying until the night before a test? Nope. And you've probably stressed yourself out in the process. Not to mention, if you don't feel prepared for a test and you feel like you're going to bomb it, then you probably will. You'll probably be the victim of your own self fulfilling prophecy. So make sure that you're being an active learner, you're studying ahead of time, breaking things out, scheduling yourself, giving yourself time to be successful, because then you will. So I hope these tips were helpful to you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Also, if you have any other ideas of what I might be able to help you with in the next session that I'm doing, which is going to be in November, you can type those ideas in the chat too, and I'll take those with me and bring you some new stuff. It's like crickets. Any questions at all? Thoughts? Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, everybody. It was great to talk to you. I hope that I helped you in some way. Have a good day. Oh, that's good. Someone's going to use it for pre AP English. Awesome. Thank you.